All right, back to our regularly scheduled message. And we've been studying a theme. We call it On Your Mark. And this series is all about getting ready. So, the starter at the starting line of a race will say, on your mark, and that means to get up to the line, get ready to run. And that's what we're encouraging all of us to do. Well, see, I'm an interim pastor, and it's my job to prepare the church for the next phase of ministry. And so, as part of getting ready for the next phase of ministry, we all have to be working together to be ready to make a difference and to transform our society. And we as leaders have been meeting, talking about what God wants next for this church. And it's going to take all of us working together as a team to move forward and to transform our area. And what I noticed is that in 1 Corinthians 12, the Apostle Paul is talking about that whole thing of teamwork, working together as a team to transform our society. So we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, starting at verse 12. I encourage you to look that up. And the Apostle Paul is using an illustration. He's using an illustration of the body. And what he's saying is that Christianity is a team sport. There's the individual sports where, you have this single person who's running the race, and it's how well that person can perform. And then there's team sports where there's more than one person working together, and it's not only how well they can each individually do their part, but it's how well they can do it together as a team, how they can interact and work together. And so the illustration is a body. And the other day, I stubbed my toe. It even turned black and blue. When my toe was faithfully serving me, walking around, doing just everyday life, it didn't complain, it didn't make a fuss, and I didn't really pay attention to it. But when I stubbed it, it complained a lot every time that I used it. And so all of a sudden I noticed how often I use my big toe and how it's used to balance, and how as I walk, my toe would complain. And so isn't it interesting that we don't know how each individual part of our body really functions and how much we use it until it's wounded, whether it be a paper cut, a pulled muscle, or whatever it is. All of a sudden we begin to realize, wait a minute, I use that a lot. And in the church body, when all of us are chipping in together, it makes it this beautiful place where all of us have the resources we need to be healthy and whole people. And that is the example that the Apostle Paul is using in 1 Corinthians 12. So let's read it. 1 Corinthians 12, we're starting at verse 12. The Apostle Paul says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Okay, so do you see the picture? There's this picture of a whole body, but the whole body is also made up of all these individual parts. I have 10 toes. I have 10 fingers. I have all these parts of me, but it's one body. And that's the image that the Apostle Paul is using to picture a sense of unity in the church where we're all one. But he's not only just talking about unity, he's actually talking about a sense of interdependence, where we're relying on each other to supply the resources we all need to be healthy and whole. And just like you need hands to pick things up and feet to walk on, we all need each other to be healthy and whole people. And the Apostle Paul goes even further with this example. He continues in verse 15, where he says, "Now if the foot should say, 'Because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body,' it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if an ear should say, 'Because I'm not an eye and I don't belong to the body,' it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it were, there are many parts, but one body." Okay, so here's a list of spiritual gifts. And this list is not complete. It's just kind of a quick summary of a lot of the spiritual gifts. And these gifts are all important for the body to function. Together, when you bring them all together, there is this sense of balance. And some of the spiritual gifts get emphasized more than others. Or shall I say, that because they're more up front, they get celebrated more than others. And so sometimes what happens is people begin to rate their own spiritual gifts. And they say, well, because I don't do certain things, I don't count and it doesn't matter. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know, sometimes I watch various people do various functions in the verse and I go like, wow, I wish I could do that. For instance, some people have an eye for creating art. And I go like, wow, I wish I could do that. And some people have an ear for music, and I go, wow, I wish I could do that. And other people have the ability to craft things and make things and create beauty. And I go like, wow, I wish I could do that. But just because I can't do those things doesn't mean I don't bring something important to the body. And just because you don't do the main sermon on Sunday morning doesn't mean that you're not part of the body and that you're not important. In other words, every spiritual gift is essential, and that means that your spiritual gift is important. It is. Because God is intentional in handing out the spiritual gifts to each person. And he does it on purpose in a way that completes the body. Just like he was smart enough to give you eyes to see so you don't stub your toe, ears to hear so that you can hear what's coming if it's sneaking up behind you. Like, he placed all of these spiritual gifts in his body to complete his body. And so every part makes a difference. And the Apostle Paul is now going to kind of continue this theme, but he's going to switch it from don't look at your own spiritual gifts as unimportant. He's going to turn it around to don't look at other people's gifts as unimportant. And that's what he says starting in verse 21. He says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are actually indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty. While our presentable parts need no special treatment, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, and that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. And again, the Apostle Paul is painting this picture of unity, and he's saying, look, all the spiritual gifts are important. You can't look at someone else's gifts and say, that's not important. Because all of them working together makes us whole. And yet, I will say that sometimes we do rate people by their spiritual gifts. Sometimes we put so much emphasis on certain spiritual gifts that we make some people feel like they don't count. So someone who leads well or teaches well or sings well, they get celebrated and they get all the focus. While people who are more in the background and they serve well and they give well and they nurture well, because they aren't put out front, they sometimes get skipped over. Now, I can't cover all the spiritual gifts and all the jobs in the church, but I'm going to have certain people stand. So if you have set up chairs for Sunday mornings, stand. There we go. And if you've helped with the nursery or a children's church, come on, stand up. Yeah. And for those of you who prepare food, have done that, I want you to stand. Yeah, see, we wouldn't have those things happening in our church if we didn't have people with a servant's heart who are willing to do those things. Now, I was going to have the sound people and the video people stand, but they're up there and you wouldn't see them. But there's things that are happening in the background all the time because people are serving. And they rarely get acclaim. They rarely get to be the center of attention and treated as special, but they are special. And these areas really make the difference. You know, people who have the gift of helps sometimes see themselves as nobodies. And the gift of helps is the ability to kind of swoop in the background and take care of all the details. In the past, we've called them the universal donors. They're able to swing into the background and take care of all the details of what needs to happen. And they are absolutely essential to making JBF work great. Now let me just say that as I see it, all of our ministry, all the things that we do as a church should be coming out of the spiritual gifts. Why? Because that's how God designed it. The spiritual gifts are given to people as a way to complete the entire body and to make a difference in our society. And knowing our spiritual gifts is essential to us using our spiritual gifts. So when a body doesn't have eyes to see, the body ends up stubbing its toes. And when it doesn't have ears to hear, the body isn't able to respond to the needs of others. And when the body doesn't have nimble hands, like the work doesn't get done. And sometimes people want to just show up and not be involved, and they aren't using their spiritual gifts. And so this is what happens, is that the body is incomplete, and Jesus' body as a church becomes a paraplegic. Incomplete. And a lot of times the body finds ways around it. They find substitutes, but it's not the same. It's an incomplete body. Do you know your spiritual gifts? Are you using your spiritual gifts? Are you helping us be complete? Because Christianity is a team sport. It's all of us working together. And all of us as individual parts need to be obedient to the head. A body that doesn't respond to the head doesn't function well. And so sometimes churches live independent from really listening to Jesus as the head of the church, because Jesus does call himself the head of the church. Are we really living in a way where we are listening to the head of the church and allowing him to direct us? And the elders, we've been meeting and we've been discussing, like, where is God taking us? What is he trying to create here? What are our spiritual gifts, and how are we designed to make an impact on the world around us and to take care of each other? Because different bodies have different abilities. You have some people who are very athletic and very coordinated, and they're great at physical activities. And you have other bodies that are more intellectual, and maybe they aren't quite as coordinated, but they have deep thoughts, and they can work with great theories. And the same is true for the church body. I have seen different churches with different spiritual gifts use it in different ways. I know of one church that is fantastic about helping people who are stuck in addiction or stuck in negative habits, and they have this incredible system and way of reaching out to their community and helping people like that come into the church and find the support they need to live successfully. I know of another church that specializes in doing drama and plays and music. They have incredibly gifted people who can sing and play and act, and they use those spiritual gifts as a way to make an impact on their society. So how is it that God has designed us, and what is he doing in us to make a difference? So the question is, how can you help? How can you be a part of this? Well, first of all, you have to learn your own spiritual gifts. If you don't know what they are, we have spiritual gifts test in the Connect wall. Just pick one up, fill it out, bring it to us, and we'll help you look through it and figure out what your spiritual gifts are. If you know your spiritual gifts, and you might not be interested in the test because you already know it, I have a sheet out there on the table where you found your communion items that you can fill out and go front and back and check off the spiritual gifts that you have. We want to know what spiritual gifts you have for two reasons. Number one, what is God doing in our church? How does he want to use us? Because the spiritual gifts define what it is that he wants us to do. And number two, we don't want to just be calling people randomly and saying, will you teach, when that's not your spiritual gift and you have no interest in teaching, where you would rather be singing or you'd rather be doing something in the background. So by giving us this information, we can place people in the positions that match them and bring them joy and peace and help the body. And we're asking you to fill that out, hand it to me, slide it under the office door, whatever it is, but let us know what it is that God has called you to do. And then we're actually asking you to serve. We're asking for everyone to chip in and become a part of that. Because in order to be a healthy church, we have to be complete. And we're asking you to help us be a healthy, functioning church that's making a difference in our community and even with our own family.